Okay, right. I've called this presentation Live Life for Today and Plan for Tomorrow. And on the bottom, there are some logos from organizations that I've worked with or been to. And in particular, Dying Matters, which I think you're aware of from what Wendy said. Dying Matters is an amazing organization that tries to encourage people to talk about the end of life. And there's a huge stigma about it. People think that if you start talking about it, it's going to come along much quicker, which of course isn't the case. Dying Matters have an awareness week, and it was only last month when they did right across the country. That's why I'm mentioning this one here too. Now, in relation to letting people know about end of life and to talk about it, the Times newspaper over the last few years have had a number of different articles. You can see some of them here. Half of couples fail to discuss dying wishes. They're all in the Times. That was from a Rosemary Bennett. Apple won't unlock my mum's iPad. Life would be better if we faced up to death. Janice Turner. Those of you who take the Times, you'll know her. I go on. Dying wishes. We have to overcome our understandable reluctance to talk about death. Again, Melanie Reid in the Times, she says, I'm putting my affairs in order. I won't read it all out, but she was doing the same sort of thing, talking about in her life what she wanted. She had a motorcycle, an accident on a horse. She nearly died, and if she had have done, she wouldn't have done all the things she's done now to plan. On the left, Linda was right when we need to talk about death more often, says Carol Midgley. So these are people promoting the idea of talking. It says here, it's not just the importance of grieving that society's forgotten. There are practical skills that the bereaved need too. Julia Samuel, I don't know, you may not, this is through the bereavement work I've done in the synagogue anyway. She's got a book there. I don't know if I'm sharing the screen, you probably can't see it. Okay. She's written a book called Grief Works, which was highly acclaimed. Some few years ago, she's written other books now about grieving. Very, very good for people who are involved with bereavement support. In her Grief Works book, she says, and I'm going to read it so you can see it with me, how we communicate with each other about our own dying is clearly not working. Of the 48% of people who die in hospital, only 2% would choose to do so. Less than a third of those dying have talked to their family about their wishes. Families who haven't had those difficult conversations, which might vary from whether they want to be resuscitated and having a living will that facilitates their decision, to being an organ donor, carry a much greater burden of responsibility. The family member will find it almost impossible to feel confident in the choices they do make. Uncertainty is the most distressing aspect of decision making, and there's always uncertainty about the medical outcome of any treatment for the dying. Add ignorance as to the wishes of the dying person to this mix, and the potential for bad decisions, regret and guilt is intensified. So this is a question, a bit rhetorical at the moment, to all of you. Can your next of kin answer these questions? Do they know whether you've created a power of attorney, could be lasting or enduring? Do they know whether you've completed a living will, not the will? And have you made a will? Will they know where it is? Do they know whether you want to be buried or cremated?
I think you know.
Do you know about your digital legacy? I'm going to be talking a bit more about that in the forum in a minute. Digital legacy is everything to do with PIN numbers and pass codes and goodness knows what. Because a lot of people forget that. Do your next of kin know whether you want to die at home, hospital or hospice? What about the passwords for bank accounts? Do your next of kin know your utility suppliers? Now, your next of kin could be your partner. And often, as I have with Angela, my wife, and me, we divide up all the things that go on. She does certain things, I do certain things, and if one of us dies, the other one might not know what was happening. Where does a car get serviced? What about the MOT? What about insurance generally? Does your next of kin know your passport is, your national insurance number, insurances, as I said?
Beautiful.
Let's move on. Have you told your family what you want to do if you get dementia or Alzheimer's? If you have a stroke? If you have a major heart attack? If you have a major illness? Do they know what you want them to do when you die? Or will you think about it later? Most people say, I'll do it later. They really do. Later may be too late. Plan for tomorrow now. It's a gift for your family. Now, what I designed from Prue's, all the work I did with Prue, I call an advanced personal information pack. And these are some of the contents in it. Personal information, including contact details, your wishes for when you die. These are all headings. Money matters, including investments, employment and retirement matters, your home, how to look after it, your health and welfare, your car and other possessions, your pet and its welfare. My sister Prue had a cat called Loki, L-O-K-I. I went up the day after she died. The undertakers had already taken her away. I went to her computer. I knew the password she told me. And there was an icon on the screen called Loki. I double-clicked on it. And there were all the instructions about the welfare of her cat called Loki. The vet's name and details, the medicine she was on having, and the name of a friend who was prepared and would love to have taken the cat on. That was all there. She'd prepared it sometime. I didn't even know she'd done it. Your digital legacy, including social media and your computer, inheritance tax, and lots of things here. I won't read them all out. You can see as I'm going along. Funeral. I mean, the one thing that surprised me with Prue was she wanted to talk about the coffin. I had it in mind that I'm going to have to tell the undertaker, but Prue asked me and asked me to get a catalogue so she and I together could choose it. It was wicker work. Now this is a screen print in a sense of the first page, part of the first page of this form. It's a PDF, Adobe form. It's not a document, it's a form. So it can be completed on a computer in the same way as any other form, or it could be printed and then hand completed later. It can be downloaded from loads of websites. You can see on the right names of ones in particular. The NHS picked it up, it was on their website. Jewish Care, they asked me to give a talk like you have some years ago, face to face, long before we knew anything about COVID. And the way it worked was I sat at the table and 10 delegates would come for about 15 minutes on my table, and there were other tables with other things going on. I was giving this sort of presentation. You're going to have to excuse me a minute. I'm going to have to get a glass of water. I'm about to cough. Excuse me.
The link for this will be available to you, so you don't have to write anything down. I'm going to make this one available to anyone who wants it later.
It's a bit of long COVID, I'm afraid. So there was a lady sitting at my table who was in her 60s. And she said, my mother, who was in her late 80s, won't talk about end of life. And I haven't got a clue what to do. But this is wonderful. Now with this form, I'll go with the form and sit down with her, and I'll ask Mum to give me the answers to the form, all the questions. And it worked. So there we are. There's the Ark Synagogue on the bottom, but there is the web address, and I'm going to come back to it again in a minute, from which you can download this document. That is it. I'm going to leave that on there so you can, I know it's being recorded, but you can write that down, and I'll go on in a minute. Now, what I say is download it onto your computer or somebody else's computer, save it on the computer onto a folder, and then open it up, and it then becomes a folder. It then becomes a form. I recommend you complete it and review it once a year. When you do get it, if you download it, you'll, I think, be quite surprised. There's about 10, 12 pages of it. To complete it properly will take you 2 or 3 hours, but it will save hours and hours, days, weeks of anybody else's time if anything happened to you and they hadn't got a central information. What I suggest is, if you're computer savvy, when you've finished it, you save it onto a USB drive, otherwise called a memory stick, not on your computer because it's got highly sensitive information. And you then put your USB drive somewhere safe, maybe with your will, or somewhere where you tell your family where it is. And once a year, you have a reminder and bring it out. I have amended it over the years. Every time people, I've got a special web email address in the form, which hasn't got my name on it because I didn't want that to happen. But it says, if you've got any comments on this form, any ideas, anything's wrong, anything omitted, will you please let the form designer know? And people have done that. So you'll see when you get it, every page at the bottom has got a different date showing how up to date those pages are. 2,500 of them have been downloaded in the last 3 or 4 years. And I don't make any charge for it. I'm not trying to make any money from it. I've been working really hard over the years to try and promote it so that other people can have it. And a number of organizations have been reluctant because it's not in their style. But for example, our synagogue, if you go into the bereavement page of our synagogue, there's a little paragraph about it and people can download it from there. I think that probably brings me to the point where I might say, are there any questions?